Hello, geeks. Want a podcast that covers a vast array of topics with no rhyme or reason? Then check out Altered Geek Unlimited, where the topics fly more or less off the cuff. We cover media news, TV, our favorite geek products, and of course, your feedback. So get altered, get geeky with the Altered Geeks every Friday on the Geekcast Radio Network.
Hi, this is Gary Chalk, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
Say, Jarvis, is it that time?
The house party protocol, sir?
Correct.
Hello and welcome to Geekcast Radio. This is episode 62. I am one of your hosts, TFG and Mike, and joining me is Steve Megatron. Hello.
Hello.
And returning to the Geekcast Radio Network, you've heard him twice on the Pull Bag. He is now on the flagship show, Positively Nerdy, Mr. Ryan Porter. Hello, sir.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. So for people who haven't listened to your two Pullbag episodes, your Origins and the Wolverine episode, why don't you let everybody know what you're all about, just in, brief. Oh, and people, go listen to those episodes.
Can I do that briefly? I have a blog and podcast, both called Positively Nerdy, as Mike alluded to, and it covers everything from comics and TV and movies and Star Wars and Star Trek and Disney and whatever the hell else I feel like talking about. So check it out.
Disney Wars, episode 7.
Counting down.
Oh God, I could so see them doing a goofy Darth Vader in that movie. Oh boy.
Only you.
All right. Yeah, I know, right? Well, they made a toy of when they did the Disney Star Wars crossovers, Goofy Darth Vader. So we are here to talk about geek culture in the mainstream. This is an idea I had a while ago. When we were all kids, it was geek and nerd were basically derogatory terms. You could get beat up for liking Transformers, or you could get beat up for liking Mask, or you could get beat up for liking Silverhawks, or whatever. And now, it seems like, I would say the last 15 to 20 years, there are geeks for every kind of genre. It doesn't matter. Geek culture almost being in the mainstream to me is like it's a subgenre of pop culture.
Basically.
But I mean, there's no shortage of topics that you can enjoy and you can be a geek about. What were some of the things that, Steve, when you were a kid, that you didn't really want to express your opinion on?
Funny thing is, just about everything I'm into, I really didn't care what people thought as far as showing it off. I carried these huge Star Trek novels and would be reading them in class during the reading time while everybody's reading these tinier books. Basically shoving the fact that I could read these giant books in their face, plus they're more intelligent than stuff that kids read at that age. Like, try second, third grade, I'm sitting here holding these 300-400 page Star Trek hardcover books. So I mean, I kind of had that. I had the Batman book bags and watched the animated series and had the toys and everything. And pretty much anytime I talked to people, as dumb as it sounds, I still played with toys till I was like 12. So I mean, it's 12, 13. I didn't care. I didn't really hide from it. Really, the only thing I've kind of gotten more open with over the years is freely expressing it with people I don't know, or don't know as well, or doing the voice stuff, which I'm a huge voiceover geek only because I love discovering who voices characters I know over the years, and so I mean that's one thing that I've gotten more open with, is just kind of walking around doing the voices and not feeling like I'm embarrassed to do it, because I kind of grew up a shy kid. So if I found that friend that was kind of geeky like me, I would latch on and we would have good times. But then if it was people I could tell, I just some of the things I wouldn't really bring up, but the Star Trek and the Batman, I kind of full force flaunted those out in the public.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Ryan?
Well, I remember in elementary school it was a lot of the things that I'm still into, quite frankly. But Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Marvel Comics boom of the early '90s, that kind of stuff was something that everybody took part in. And then somewhere late middle school, definitely by junior high, it just wasn't cool anymore to read comic books or to watch cartoons or this or that. And unfortunately, I took the opposite approach, and I hid my fandom like you would not believe. I did not want. I don't remember if there was a catalyst for it. I don't remember what caused me to completely introvert my fandom, but it was like I could not let people know that I was reading both Star Trek and Star Wars novels. I got into Star Wars way late as a fan. I think I might have told that story on the Origins episode, actually. But I got into it way late, and by the time I discovered it, it was smack dab in the middle of the dark period, and people didn't think Star Wars was ever coming back. And that's when I discovered it and got really into it just in time for Heir to the Empire to come out. And like Steve, I was way ahead of the curve on reading, so those books were everything to me. I wrote Star Wars fan fiction before there was the term fan fiction existed, because I wondered who. I mean, I like right down to like details of who would take over the power vacuum of Jabba dying, which apparently I totally missed, because obviously that was Talon Card in those novels. But I guess I missed that part. Maybe my reading comprehension wasn't quite as good as I'd like to pat myself on the back for being. but and it was like I kind of left the action figures behind, but I never stopped playing with Legos. And that to me was still like that kid thing that you didn't let anybody know about. You didn't let people know that you watched, movies like Star Wars, and you lived for, episodes of Star Trek to come. I remember being so excited for Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and half of that turned out all right. But
Which one?
Well, I'm actually in the middle of a rewatch of Voyager, and despite everything that's wrong with that show, I really like it. Like somehow it's better than the sum of its parts, but I don't want to get on a whole Voyager digression here. But I loved all that stuff always, but was like terrified to show it. And it wasn't until college that it started to creep back in. And then my junior year of college, I had a couple roommates that I really didn't get along with, but we all were kind of into the same thing anyway, and that kind of was kind of the beginning of me kind of coming back out and going to comic book shops again and talking to people about it. And it was very, I don't want to paint myself as this complete loner, because I had friends and stuff, but most of my friends didn't know I was into these things as much as I was. And it was very lonely, and you kind of, this is high school, the internet started to become a thing. But I mean, you hoped that somebody writing in the back of the letter pages in comics shared your viewpoint, or it was a very lonely existence. And I think the internet is probably a big part of the reason that we're having this discussion about why geek culture is more prevalent, that people realize they weren't alone, kind of thing. So it wasn't until college that I started to embrace it, and now it's full-fledged. I mean, the tagline of Positively Nerdy is celebrate your fandom. Say it loud, say it proud. But it took me a long time to get there, admittedly.
For me, there were... Steve was saying that by the time he was 15 or so, he kind of grew out of the action figures and stuff like that. And I I have one traumatic experience that I've told this story for the last 6 years that I've podcasted, so I know Steve is sick
I
and
know
tired of
exactly what
hearing
you're
it.
talking about.
I'm gonna get to it, but let me just set it up here, okay? So I have one traumatic story, but oddly enough, that event didn't like. I think the reason why that event didn't scar me for life like a Michael Bay movie would as a child um, would be that the year after that event happened, the Turtles came out. And I was all gung ho again. I think for my stopping point on action figures as a kid, say preteen, was probably 15 years old. Once I had the Falcon Zord, I was set from the Power Rangers film. But that tragic story, in a nutshell, basically, my mom and dad had divorced when I was 2. My dad was living in Rhode Island. My mom and I were living in Massachusetts. For some stupid reason, I don't know why, all the good characters and the good playsets, like the good guy playsets, not the good as in quality, playsets were at my mom's, and all the bad guys and the bad characters and the bad guy playsets were at my dad's. I have no idea why it ended up being that way. No clue. Um, and one time when I was 6 in 1986, I went down to my dad's and my Snake Mountain set, all of my Evil Warriors, every piece of He-Man thing I had at his house, poof, gone. He sold them. His reasoning, you're too old to play with toys. I was 6 years old, damn it. Um, so, well, like I said, there's that. I would say 95, I kind of got out of toys, and then when I had some more disposable income by the time I was 28, I really got back into it. And then a couple of years ago, I got out of it again as far as collecting toys. For me, when I was little, because I wasn't into comics. I wasn't in the know on the comics aspect. I was into cartoons, television shows, movies, that kind of thing. And my mom would let me watch anything. She really would. I remember by the time I was 8 or 9, I had seen Lethal Weapon 1 at least 4 times. Um, and it was just one of those things where, for me, books were my geekdom. I had up to the point I would say by the time I was 13, I had read every single Hardy Boys Case Files book they ever put out at that time.
I read all those books.
Oh God, that's a collection I would love to have back. Now I learned recently that, and I think I kind of knew this as a kid, but those books are a lie. What I mean by that is the author. It wasn't just one author, it was a whole consortium of authors, and the author's name, Franklin W. Dixon, basically the person does not exist. It was a bunch of different people writing under that name, which is kind of sad. Let's see, what else for me? I was kindergarten, first, second, and third grade. I was LARPing before it was a thing of the now. I was LARPing Transformers as, an elementary schooler. Same thing with He-Man, same thing with Ninja Turtles when that came around. So live action roleplay is not a new thing, ladies and gentlemen. It just isn't. All right. I want to talk about briefly here how the terms of geek and nerd have evolved since we were kids. I mean, back then, they were basically insults. And, like you said, Ryan, and like your saying says, let your fandom flag fly, or be proud and share it and whatever else. It's like, back then, you couldn't. I know Steve is a very outspoken child, and I'm sure his son will be that way as well. But back then, like where I was living, it was very hard to do that. Really was. I remember, because there are certain things for some reason, and I don't know if it was my school or just I don't know what it was. There were certain things at school you could not talk about, and I have no idea why. And it was a regular public elementary school. It wasn't like it wasn't Catholic school. It wasn't a private school. It wasn't anything like that. But there, apparently, there's just certain things teachers didn't want you to talk about. Whereas nowadays, it's like geek and nerd. Everybody, I mean, hell, the title of our network is the Geekcast Radio Network. The title of your stuff is Positively Nerdy. I mean, it's basically a positive thing now, both of those terms. So where do you guys see, or how do you guys see those terms evolving over the last 20, 30 years? Steve?
Well, I see the fact that, for one, media has kind of made a huge shift. I would kind of argue around the time that daytime or like Saturday morning cartoons started fading to the wayside. So I'd say kind of close to mid 90s, everything started getting more, you started seeing more kidly or kid friendly programming. I mixed the two words there. So you start seeing more of that. You start seeing more animation. You start seeing more superhero comics becoming live action films. And I think that, I mean, yeah, Batman and Superman had it, and they were pretty much the only ones by that point, and that's kind of where the Batman films kind of died off. But you started getting the resurgence of Star Wars in the late 90s, which, I mean, granted, there were special editions to begin with, and you got the prequel trilogy that started, and so, I mean, I would argue that that's possibly the tipping point where everything started kind of gushing back in, and you have all these parents with their nostalgia from the 70s of watching this stuff. Yeah, Trek was going on, and it kind of never really stopped after the films and after TNG kicked off. But I would argue when Star Wars came back to theaters is when the tipping point took place, because then you started getting things like X-Men and Spider-Man, and then everything else kind of snowballed from there, and it became an acceptable term to be called a geek or a nerd, and let people know how much you love these various franchises, and whether you were popular or not, you pretty much were able to find common ground with people by that point.
Oh yeah, I mean the whole thing with specifically high school and the cliques and groups, the jocks, the cheerleaders, the outcasts, the this, the that. By the time I was a junior and senior in high school, all that crap was out the window. You found your own friends. You found your own people that enjoyed what you enjoyed. And that's what we kind of do now online.
True.
Ryan, thoughts?
I was getting ready for this. I was really looking for that sort of 0 hour moment you could point to and say this is when geek culture like exploded and became a little more mainstream. Mm-hmm. And I think that Steve probably nailed it with the re-release of the Star Wars trilogy and getting ready for the prequels, because I think it was that thing that kind of people started to come out of the woodwork. Like people all of a sudden were Star Wars fans that you had, or at least personally, I had no idea were Star Wars fans. And because they had hidden it the way I had hidden it, or it just hadn't come up, or you just don't realize how important these movies are to people, or it's the generational thing, which Steve also touched on, that so-and-so's dad never thought to show them Star Wars before, but now that it's coming back, you can go to the movies and see it together. And we're actually kind of coming around to the third generation of that when the sequel trilogy comes out, 18 months or so from now, whenever that is. That's, I mean, I won't be able to take my son to episode 7, but he'll be old enough for me to go to maybe 8 and definitely 9. Because it was a big deal for me to go with my dad to see the re-release of the Star Wars movies. And Star Wars has kind of always had that. Trek will, as much as I enjoy the new movies and as much as they've revitalized Trek will never be cool. It just won't. It's just
I'm staying out of this discussion.
I definitely have to agree with you there. Because I love Star Trek as much as the next geek, and even in Future Imperfect, myself and Mike Dodd, we kind of talked about it on there too, and said that actually the last episode we mentioned the fact that Star Trek is pretty much the only place that it lives is on television. It's the films. I mean, yeah, some of them are great, like the original series and the TNG ones. But yeah, the rebooted ones, they're trying to go in a Star Warsy, direction. Which, yeah, they brought them back, but it just doesn't work. But it's not. People love the Star Wars films when it comes to that. People love the Star Trek shows when it comes to that. So I mean, and films always trump TV. So it's kind of. I totally get it.
Yeah, and that might be what it is, but there's always been this resonance with Star Wars that just wasn't there with Trek. And it makes me upset because I was a Trek fan long before I was a Star Wars fan. And as much as I'm a Star Wars fan, I get very personal and protective about Trek because I think most of the people that dismiss it don't understand it. But Star Trek to me is kind of, it is what it is, and you need to, you either enjoy it or you don't. Star Wars is more... you get out of it whatever you want to get out of it. It's either a fun action movie or you can go deep and get philosophical and like all the cool stuff that Yoda says in Empire Strikes Back. You can get really into that if you want, but you're going to get out of Star Wars what you put into it, and Trek is what it is. Take it or leave it. That's kind of always been my quick pitch on what the difference between the two of them is. But I think when that kind of, and then the Phantom Menace, 1999, was really too when the internet started to kind of become a lot more prevalent. Like it existed before that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember spending, how long did it take to download that first production still of that shuttle flying over the Coruscant skyline? Like how long did I sit there and wait for my computer to download that friggin' picture? But that was also, chat rooms back then. That's what ask your parents, kids. That's, you were able to start communicating with other people about it. Like there was somebody, even if there wasn't somebody in your house or in your class or on your street that wanted to talk about Star Wars, there was somebody online who wanted to talk about Star Wars. So I think that kind of coincided with the internet really just taking off. And personally for me, 2 years later, I'm at college with what at the time was the fastest internet connection in the history of forever, and it was so amazing. And it just probably pales in comparison to what they have now, but it was out there, and there were people to talk to about it, and there was more. And because just like Star Wars influenced pop culture in the 70s, it was influencing pop culture all over again, and at the new millennium, and it was there. And then to jump ahead a little bit, maybe I shouldn't, but I don't know if that fed into the rise in conventions or vice versa, but that has got to be a big part of it too, is to actually go out there and meet other people that are into the same stuff that you are into. So that might be jumping ahead a little bit though, so I guess I should hold off a little bit.
Well, no, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, it's one of those things where Star Wars was a jumping off point for a lot of people. I remember watching... I want to call it episode 1, but it isn't. It's. I remember watching episode 4, and I'm like, wait, where's the first 3? When I was a kid, I was like, am I missing something here? I remember watching that, and when I got to the end of that movie as a kid, I was like, wait, that's it? Where's the rest? But yeah, no, I mean, Star Wars has got... say what you will about Lucas and his constant tomfoolery with the reissues and the requels and the whatever else, as far as fooling with his original films. They are still damn good films. You just got to find the version that you want to watch. I think for me it was... There were so many paradigm shifts when it comes to geek culture then and now, because there's so many things. Like, I know our good friend Pecan Court Michael, he only has one toy collection, Transformers, and he has almost every single Transformer that was ever made, except for maybe some of the rare stuff. But I mean, he has his office in his basement, like the whole wall is giant cabinets filled with Transformers from every generation. So there are people out there that would just do one fandom, and then there's people like Steve and I who we like a lot of stuff. I mean, I can't count on my hand how many cartoons I like. I can't count on my hand how many films I like or how many TV series I like. Um, I'll say as a kid, my imagination was very vivid because every time as a kid I would see a helicopter, I'm like, ooh, Airwolf. you know, um, so there is that. All right, so how has how has everything that is geeky now? Basically, how do you guys feel about the fact that almost every like almost everything is geeky? I mean, geeky has basically become the fan word for anything and everything you like. Um, what do you guys think about that as far as the evolution of geek culture, Steve?
Well, while I don't mind it,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, there are, fake people out there that are doing it just because, just because it's the cool, popular thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's as prevalent as what people think. I think that more people like to just slap it on there just because, based on their appearances sometimes and some of that other stuff. Um, but I think that a lot of a lot of geek culture in general is it's that constant, ability to just be enthusiastic for what you care about. I mean, everybody has different interests. I mean, you can be a car geek, you can be an audio geek, you can be, a film buff, you can, any of that stuff. I mean, everything kind of falls under those titles. Um, it's more so just kind of being comfortable being you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sometimes, being that it's the cool thing, and you've got, all these networks, including ours, that are kind of around. You have some that are, doing it for the love of it, and other ones not doing it. They're just doing it because that's what everybody pays attention to. But I think that in general, geek culture is very important, and sometimes people kind of overlook the fact that everybody has interests, and it's just what matters to you.
What about you, Ryan?
I think it's just the kind of the blanket term for, enjoying and not being ashamed of the things that make you happy. Like you said, you can be a car geek or a sports geek or any other, and I don't think it's as geeks rule the world quite as much as we're making it out to be at the moment, but it's certainly better than it used to be. But it's shifting a little bit away from the stereotype. It's actually gotten to the point now when people point out the stereotype, there's backlash, which I enjoy. I actually just saw a tweet today at some Goodwill billboard that said he finally got a girlfriend. Now we have all his toys or something like that, basically advertising their toy department.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. And before that would be accepted, and now there's backlash when something like that happens, which is awesome. But we're not there yet. But I think it's just this thing that it's enjoying what makes you happy and realizing that you can't make fun of the guy dressed up as a stormtrooper if you're that guy at the football game with his face painted. It's the same thing. One of you's at a convention, the other one's at a football game, but it's really the same thing. And I think that those barriers and those stigmas have broken down through everything we've already talked about. And it's just being a geek is admitting that you are unabashedly in love with something.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just there's so much, and what really interests me nowadays is like if I listen to a podcast, which these days since I produce a lot of them is very rare. When I listen to a podcast and someone brings up something, a topic that I wouldn't think that that show might cover, and they cover it, I listen, and I'm like, hey, I kind of like that too. Not because I'm jumping on a bandwagon per se, but it's there are certain things that I've liked that I might have forgotten about because I like so many different things and do so many different things. I mean,
it's gotten. Sorry to interrupt. It's kind of gotten to the.
No, go ahead.
It's gotten to the point where you're doing these geek things to fit in, where before those geek things kind of ostracized you from other people, whether it was self-inflicted or not. Now you have people seeking out Marvel comics so they can fit in with all the people seeing the Marvel movies. You know what I mean? Like there's a desire to know what everybody's talking about. And if it's, look at a TV show like Lost, which I think was huge in kind of expanding on geek culture because it was this, good or bad. You maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't, but it was a great character show first and foremost. It had awesome characters that had compelling backstories that made you care about them. Oh, by the way, there's also all these bizarre supernatural elements. So it's also, it's also a sci-fi show, but it's disguised as a character piece. So it's shows like that. I'm struggling off the top of my. I guess Game of Thrones right now would be another example. That is,
or The Walking Dead, or Breaking Bad, or any of the current television shows.
Well, they have to have some sort of sci-fi edge to them. I don't know. I haven't watched all of Breaking Bad. I don't know that Breaking Bad.
No, Breaking Bad is not sci-fi.
Sci-fi or fantasy or something. It has to have some sort of something outside of the norm, and that's kind of what I mean with Marvel. Because now people want to know who that purple guy was, so they're either going to go seek out, a quote unquote a comic book nerd, or they're going to go pick up a comic book. Now the numbers have proven that just because somebody saw Spider-Man doesn't mean they're going to run to their comic book store and all of a sudden sales of Spider-Man are going to go through the roof. I know we've talked about that before. That market that they keep pandering to just does not exist. But those people become interested and they want to know more. And they, like I said, they want to know who the purple guy is. They want to know, what's coming next, and they want to know, is that the way it was in the comics? And as comic book readers, usually it's, borrow this and read it. And, that's how you're going to find out about it kind of thing. So
I think it was with the Transformers films, the Michael Bay Transformers films, that I kind of found out about like prequel comics or prequel novels or tie-ins. Now, I know tie-ins have been around for a long time before 2007, but that's really where I found out about them, and I'm more interested in some of the Marvel like if they do a comic tie-in, like to bridge Avengers to Iron Man 3, they did a 2-issue run for Iron Man 3 Prelude, where it was a story about what Rhodey was doing while Tony was in the Battle of New York. And I kind of like that. I don't mind it so much if they do like a 2 or 3 issue run for a comic to tie the films together. All right, let's see here. What else? Now, I don't know. Maybe I should look the term up, actually. But pop culture, to me, I get the general gist of the term. It's basically whatever's popular in culture at the time. But I mean, like I said earlier, geek culture is essentially a subgenre of pop culture now. There's not really a lot of difference. I don't see much. Because, like you said, Ryan, all the Marvel movies are popular. Despite what we fans may think of the Transformers movies, they have been wildly popular. I'm sure those Shrek-looking turtle movies are going to be popular. So I'm not sure where the line is drawn between pop and geek culture.
Well, I think I don't know how or why, but I think that pop culture has been become the replacement for nerd culture. And I don't know if that's just because people don't want to say nerd culture, and it's more socially acceptable to say pop culture. But now when people refer to pop culture, they're usually not referring to music or top 40 radio or something like that. They're referring to movies and comic books and TV shows. And again, a lot of TV shows now have that sci-fi and or fantasy spin. I'm not watching it, but there's the Resurrection on NBC with people coming back from the dead, not zombified, but some.
You mean Revolution?
No. Revolution. Revolution's another example, but that's not what I'm referring to.
Okay. No, it's the one where they come back from the dead. It's the revival show. I can't remember the name of it.
It's got Clarence Boddicker in it. I don't remember. or Red Foreman's dad, or he is Red Foreman. Sorry, Eric Foreman's dad. Yeah, but anyway,
I don't subscribe to that candy.
It's just, I think it's just because it's so prevalent now that it's taken over what pop culture means. Because comic books are, I don't want to say they're popular because the numbers aren't really there to say that they're popular, but what they've inspired and what they've created and what they've developed through comic books and through this wealth of stuff that's been there for a long time, but now all of a sudden is getting its due for the first time. Well, I shouldn't say for the first time in a long time. I guess the first time in 20-ish years. And it's nice to see that's, again, I guess I'm circling back now to, you see people going to nerd culture things to fit in, where before it was the nerd culture things that separated you.
What about you, Steve? Any opinions?
No, I mean, I think you guys pretty much summed it up there.
Yeah. And I love how some people just basically say, "Oh, well, that show plays to the lowest common comedy denominator, or it makes fun of geeks, or it does this," and people don't really see the full potential. And I'm this way too. There are a lot of TV shows out there that I do not watch because I just have zero interest in them. I'll tell you one thing that, like, it doesn't make me mad all the time, but there's one thing more recently that I am so sick of in geek and nerd culture is zombie apocalypse this, vampire hunter that, everything else this, that, what kind of a robot apocalypse? Barbie apocalypse, for crap's sake, or whatever the hell. It's like, oh God, get over it. Yeah, I mean, geek culture is here to stay, folks. It's not going anywhere. And as we've already said, you may, like something and not even realize you're a geek about it. There are tons of, like Steve said, there are audiophiles, there are music geeks, there are, people who enjoy putting podcasts or video casts together and all that good stuff. And it's a very wide world of interests, and we should all be able to get along no matter what our opinions are, for the most part. There are certain things, like the fact that Megatron and Galvatron are two separate people, or in some cases the same guy, that people might disagree over. But I don't know, I felt like having this discussion because it just seems like it's the norm now to be geeky or nerdy. Like you were saying, Ryan, it's taken a 180, where, when we were kids, it was kind of, ooh, don't do that. Any final thoughts, Steve?
No, nothing else from the peanut gallery.
Ryan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just, it's nice that, well, yeah, no, nothing else to add. I'm just going to start getting redundant and rambling, and no, I'm good. I think I've said my piece.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back to close the show after this. Pixels in the Animation is the Geekcast Radio Network's video game cartoon review show. We are covering every episode of 9 different video game cartoons. Join TV's Mr. Neil and myself, TFG and Mike, as we trek through multiple Mario tunes, Zelda, Captain N, Mega Man, Sonic, and we are also driving through Donkey Kong Country. Pixels in the Animation is 100 episodes of video game cartoon goodness, so tune in to help us find the Pixels in the Animation, which you can find every Wednesday on iTunes and www.geekcastradio.com. Pause! Alright, we are back. Ryan, where can the people find you and all of your positively nerdy stuff?
The easiest place is, of course, positivelynerdy.com. That's the home of everything, the podcast, the written reviews, the weekly features, including the Tuesday Top 5 and Friday's Box Office Time Machine. And you can subscribe to the podcast. You can listen to it right through positivelynerdy.com. You can go to iTunes and download it there, subscribe. leave me a review, please, please, please. Leave me. I hate begging for reviews, but I'm going to do it. And I'm also on Stitcher, if that's your preferred listening method. Positive Nerds on Stitcher, so check it out.
Awesome. Where what have you got coming up? Can you give us a preview?
Well, in a couple weeks, I'll be at C2E2, hoping to have a blast for 3 days down in Chicago, and talking to a bunch of people, both creators, professionals, and anybody that I bump into that I feel like shoving a microphone in their face. Really looking forward to that time. And then 2 weeks later, it's the Motor City Comic Con. Then a month later, I'm going down to North Carolina for Heroes Con. Big summer, lots of summer movies coming up. Very excited. Just saw Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and we've got Spider-Man right around the corner, and X-Men after that, and Godzilla, and man, it's and all of that will be covered in great detail. Believe me, on Positively Nerdy. So it's going to be a good couple months.
Awesome. Steve, what have you got coming up on AGU?
It's kind of one of those random things that I never know until we sit down to record. I find it keeps the show a lot nicer that way. Just because I don't ever know what I'm doing. Kind of like every other night. But besides that, we will have information about a Geekcast Radio contest for the Year 5 celebration. Details will be on the site.
Yeah. And the announcement will also be in the next episode of Geekcast Radio, which I'm not sure what it's going to be just yet. I have several ideas written down, but I'm not set on any one of them at this point. All right, so I have been TFG and Mike with
Steve Megatron Phillips
and Ryan Porter.
Unleash the Geek in you, and we will catch you next time.
You've just listened to Geekcast Radio on the Geekcast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at Geekcast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/GeekcastRadio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.